Good morning. I'd like to chat with you just for a few minutes about a topic I call how much should Christians resist? It's um it's easy to figure out and to observe that over this past 24, 30 months or so, with the onslaught of COVID, that the rights and privileges of the individual around the world, but we're certainly feeling it here in our country in Canada, have been stripped away or at least somewhat put on check or assaulted to some degree, and we've been limited and we've been forced to comply with the mandates of our government, who, for our best interest, they said this is the way to go. And I have my own opinion about whether they handled it right, whether there was overreach, whether it could have been done differently, and we can do that at another chat. But the topic for today is how much should Christians resist? So there are some commands in the Bible that we are to certainly pray for those that are in charge, those that are in authority, and I believe that that should never change. And I think to a certain degree there's a general underlying theme or message that we are to comply as much as possible with those that are in charge and be good citizens. And I understand that and I respect that. I receive that. I believe that's sound advice. I believe it's the way Christians should be. But on a personal level, some people have chosen to be a little more militant, been a little more outspoken in terms of personalizing their anger. And what happens is we start to target the people that are the players that are involved. We target our prime minister, and I've done a little bit of that. I've been a little bit more, let's say, more than disappointed in him. I've been somewhat privately a little more disappointed in our provincial leadership. I'm disappointed in the Biden administration and the way they're going, and certainly other governments around the world. I'm not sure that they're doing things in the best interest of the people. So at some point, though, an individual believer has to choose how, in addition to how they represent Christ in other situations, how do I, as a Christian, go about representing Jesus when it comes to things like our God given rights and privileges being taken away? At what point do we speak up, and to what degree do we speak up? Now, if you choose to be a more militant person, I've heard of believers, churches that have decided that, some organizations are going to sue various entities. Um, Others have gone into public forums and places and protested and become quite angry and riled people up. And we're going to march here, we're going to march there, and we're going to do this, and we're going to take back our rights, and calling out the police. And I, and again, that's your choice. You can be that way. I have decided, in my own case, to be passively resistant. Um, I said to someone not too long ago, all I want to be is a little pebble in Justin Trudeau's shoe. In other words, I mean no harm to the man. In fact, I've learned, thank you, Jesus, I've learned to pray for the individual and pray for him for the well being of his soul. And even if I see something that I think is wrong and maybe even on the verge of being evil, again, I think it's important we don't focus on the individual player. They are fulfilling possibly a very timely role in a succession of events and things that have to happen leading up to a point in human history where the world is going to be so frustrated, so broken, that they will be so desperate for a Messiah that they will actually receive and accept a false Messiah when he comes. They haven't got the foresight or the spiritual insight to see that the true Christ is here now to be received into each of your lives on a personal basis, and that he is coming back very, very soon. Instead of being patient and waiting for that, or making changes in their individual lives and such, they will accept a false Christ, an antichrist. And he will come in with some answers and some solutions, because the world will be so broken at that point that they will be prepared to accept anything. And that is partially what this COVID social experiment is all about. Did the governments of the world overreach? Did the World Health Organization, extend authority and rights and in concert with other players who we may know about or not know about? Was this done in the world's best interest? I would say not. In hindsight, now we look back and see how it was mismanaged. But it's interesting that it's just one of the steps that's going to lead to this particular point in time, which is not too far down the road. And so what I'm trying to say to you is that these types of times and pressures and frustrations, they are now in the mode of an acceleration. They are going to now get, COVID was the beginning, but this type of control is going to accelerate and become even more intense. And the mindset will be that governments now are in control, not the people, but the governments are now in control. And not even the governments, but there's certain powers that be and entities behind those governments. And there's more of a globalist mindset that's starting to set into the world. And so you're going to find that some of the problems that the world has experienced have actually been played or orchestrated by entities that you may be able to put a face to and maybe not. But all of that shouldn't be news or a surprise to Christians. We have the Bible that tells us about the birth pains, about the increase in these evil ways, in these dark days. We understand that. We know this is all part of it. And that's why it's easy for me at this point to not blame the actual individuals that are the ones being used as the pawns in the game. That is why it's important that for every politician or everyone who, even the LGBTQ and the Me Too movement, the Black Lives Matter, these are just individuals that happen to, timely in a way, happen to be the players that are promoting these agendas that, again, all in part all contribute to a larger problem, and that is the breakdown of the world, and to the point where the world will be crying out for a Messiah, and they will be willing to accept a false Messiah, the Antichrist. And so this is not a surprise to believers. So now each believer has to decide, to what degree do I protest? To what degree do I express myself? I when I say I'd like to be a pebble in the shoe of Justin Trudeau, that's probably the extent of where I want to go, because in no way do I want to or could I thwart where this is all headed. This isn't going to be reversed. There's no way of getting this right back or that right back, thinking that we're going to return to some kind of normal Judeo-Christian values, and those days are gone. And so if you can accept that, and if you can be sure that you don't make it personal, and that includes the police officers that show up at your church and want to close your church, do not make it personal with them. See every player from top to bottom, and even some of the organizations I just mentioned, see them as living human souls that need Jesus. And I think if you can do that, your resistance will be measured and won't be beyond a reasonable point where you can still say, I represent Jesus Christ, and nothing I did here today, would have upset him, because I did it with the thought of, with the love of those individuals in my mind and in my heart. I did it knowing who I represent. But yes, a little passively resistant, in maybe a little slow to react, maybe a little slow to follow their mandates, maybe a little bit expressive, but in a loving way on platforms like Facebook or anything else. But please, each of you individually, respect the rights of the people. Understand some people are just doing their job. Understand others have an agenda and maybe are out to even hurt us. But even if that's the case, we're commanded to pray for our enemies. So regardless of what government officials do, or various groups around the world, and yes, and some of it is evil, let us not lose track of who we represent, that what's been laid out and what is happening right before us has actually been mandated and forecasted in the Bible. So how much should Christians resist? Well, it's a personal decision. But I think if you do it with the uh, parameters of, I have to love the individual, I have to pray for their soul, that I have to always remember who I represent. You're representing Jesus Christ. And in that case, we're not out to harm anybody. And even though you're taking away my rights, I'm going to continue to pray for your soul. I am going to be somewhat outspoken about it, but not in a cruel, demeaning way. But again, if you've decided, if you're one of those Christians or one of those churches that's going to pound the desk and demand your rights, I think you need to rethink where you're at. You need to understand, see the bigger picture, what this is all about and where it's headed, and why this is what was forecasted in the Bible. And so God bless you. This wasn't a very scriptural chat, but I really felt that the question needed to be raised. How much should we resist when people are taking away our rights and privileges, and pushing the envelope, trying to see if they can even take more? Of course, it's frustrating, and of course, it's not something we enjoy, being a part of. But again, just remember what we talked about today, and God bless you. I hope this has been a blessing in some way to you. Take care.